And coming in at number 2 is the deal that almost gave my bank account a heart attack. Our $1 million plus buy in Wisconsin. We had to lay down over $1 million in cash right on the table to buy an entire hidden nest of high-value muscle cars. This is what having real guts in the business looks like.
One car may have created more problems for Richard Rawlings than any build in Gas Monkey history. For years, Richard Rawlings built his reputation on bold deals and turning forgotten vehicles into automotive gold. To fans, he looked unstoppable. But behind the success were business setbacks, legal disputes, and controversies that rarely made it into the spotlight. Then a single Mustang sparked questions that threatened to become much bigger than the car itself. So, what happened that turned an ordinary build into a major controversy? And could this lawsuit reveal deeper problems behind the scenes of Richard Rawlings' empire? Join us as we uncover Richard Rawlings' most controversial lawsuit yet, and the fallout that followed.
Taking the crown at number 1, the massive Denny Cannonball Cannonberg collection. We're talking over 200 classic motorcycles, collector cars, and decades of racing history all packed into one unbelievable collection.
How it all began. A Mustang deal with close pal Dennis Collins may have just put everything Richard Rawlings built at risk. But before the fame and the Mustang moment that almost ruined it all, who exactly was Richard? Born in 1969 into a fast-paced auto city, Fort Worth, Texas. He grew up around a wrench and workbench in his father's garage. As expected, he developed a serious affinity for cars. Before he turned 14, he had been at auto shows with his father, constructing and painting cars. To him, they weren't just four-wheeled asphalt cruisers, they were canvases on wheels, and he was Picasso. But being a teenage sensation at auto shows was never the goal. It was just the beginning of a journey to build the empire he had always had in mind. But it was surely a good start. In 1999, he took the first step towards entrepreneurship, creating a printing press company. But would a chronic gearhead ever really find happiness in anything else? 3 years into his printing press company, he finally scratched that automotive itch, selling the printing press and starting up his one auto shop, Gas Monkey Garage. This wasn't a Prometheus discovering fire arc. It was a far more volatile move. He made his mark on the automotive space in Dallas, Texas, reconstructing classic American muscle cars into hot rods and grabbing all the attention. But aside from his skills as a mechanic, he had a larger-than-life personality. The tattoos, the rings, and his popular catchphrase, GYSOT, translated as, "Get you some of that." Something about him just screamed television success, but he did not have a chance with Hollywood directors at first. Other than the 26-foot auto shop, he needed an audience, needed some serious popularity, and a fan base that could turn the heads of a Hollywood director. So in the classic fake-it-till-you-make-it scheme, he created a serious buzz around the auto shop, self-sponsored sizzle reels to get himself into the spotlight, and pitched himself to a lot of Hollywood directors. At first, he faced a lot of rejections, but that didn't faze him. Instead, he took a massive risk in 2007. He broke the Cannonball Run record, a feat last achieved in 1979. He honed his pitch for 5 more years and went right at it again. And for the first time, persistence met opportunity. The Discovery Channel finally bought into his ideas, and so it began. He rebuilt coupes, Shelby Mustangs, and classic American muscle cars, turning Gas Monkey into a global franchise almost overnight. However, success comes with attention. Every argument was overblown on social media, and arguments with other mechanics made it into public view, but the cars were the real star. It didn't matter if it was a coupe or a Mustang. Gearheads just wanted a piece of the Gas Monkey reconstruction arc. How did it go for Richard? Gas Monkey. More than an auto shop. Maybe Richard did want that television deal desperately, selling off his printing press and pursuing it like a dog with a bone. But that wasn't all that he wanted. In fact, he was indeed building a franchise. His real goal was entrepreneurship. He wanted a business franchise that lived off a huge television influence. That only meant one thing: building a reputation and keeping the world completely invested in his person and the shop. The show, Pawn Stars, became more than just a franchise for motorheads. It sure did start like that, but a few months into the show, everything changed. Richard Rawlings dominated the headlines for years, turning heads and grabbing every motorhead's attention. The rebuilds were insane. The energy was infectious. And more importantly, Richard was the face of it all. The show was raw, unhinged, and more than just a few bearded mechanics plugging oil leaks and fixing cars. The cast members became so important that they had hashtags dedicated to them on social media. For context, Aaron Kaufman was a shining light in the garage. He was the lead mechanic and a crazy genius in facilitating designs and creating a workflow to hit deadlines. But more than his expertise and ingenuity, Aaron was the perfect foil for Richard. They had a connection so intense that they bonded on the screen like brothers. Even viewers who did not watch Fast and Loud for the cars just wanted a scene on the show where these two had conversations. But as much as they shared what seemed like an ethereal connection, Aaron had a much different personality. He was the guy anyone would have a beer with. He was calm and just more about his engines than anything else. He believed building cars was 100% trial and error for all the good. According to him, he was conversant with the right and the wrong way to build a car, and that's what made working exciting. But as much as fans loved his cool-as-you-like persona, other cast members like the short-haired blonde, Christy Brimberry, Casey Mathieu, and Tom Smith embraced the spotlight as much as Richard did. Over the years, they found and converted rare automobiles, and their numbers went through the roof until 2025, when everything changed. As much as Rawlings loved to work his gigs alone like a lone wolf, he made a friend in the automotive world who was just as car-crazed as he is and intense about profit: Dennis Collins. Like Richard, he had his own YouTube page, where he displays his love for cars. They have been friends for over 2 decades and even rode side by side in 2007, when Richard broke the Cannonball Run record. But what happens when two car-crazy friends are seduced by the alluring power of a classic red Ford Mustang? The Mustang deal that changed everything. While Richard was super handy with a wrench, he did not build his whole Fast and Loud image around being some super mechanic. That was mostly Aaron. He was in the spotlight for other reasons. Maybe he indeed was a skilled mechanic, but he was an entrepreneur at heart. While he was not the Wall Street suit-wearing genius, he was a completely different kind. He knew when classic cars could be bought, fixed, and flipped for a profit, and was smart enough to perceive moments when they could be bought off the market for cheap and sold for a blinding profit without fixing them. In most cases, he had done the former, using Aaron's magic to get the car up and running and sell for some real profit. But it didn't always work. Sometimes things went awry. But it's the business world anyway. Wins and losses were a natural part of the bargain. But he's never had a loss as personal as the one on his recent Mustang deal. In 2025, Dennis, an experienced car collector, brought Richard along on the Mustang deal. But it wasn't just any kind of Mustang, it was the Holy Grail. It's not every time anyone comes across a 1964.5 Ford Mustang. Obviously, it was any collector's dream, especially if they looked to flip this automotive piece of history for profit. According to Dennis, the car was so rare that only 36 of them were made. And he could tell, at least, where to find 11 of them. What real car collector wouldn't be thrilled by that? The pair decided to take on a 50-50 split if they ever convinced the owner to sell to them. On getting to Colfax, Wisconsin, they met Jean Rognaby, the woman who owned the car. After a little back and forth, the pair bought the car off her hands for an eye-watering $60,000. To Jean, she had struck a solid deal, selling that old piece for up to $60,000. How often does that ever happen? However, Richard and Dennis could tell they had just stumbled on something far more valuable than a modern-day Mustang. $60,000 was a complete undersell on Jean's part, and the pair knew it. But just how much of a profit were they looking at? For Richard, they probably had a fair chance of making an extra $30,000 on the car. But fans noticed Dennis's silence. His moves seemed more calculated, almost like he was planning something. Soon, they decided to take the car to an expert, who could properly appraise the car and tell the cost. One look at the Mustang, the rarity already suggested that it could be sold at a profit. Immediately, Dennis suggested he had a buyer willing to cough up $200,000 for the car. Somehow, Richard jumped at the deal and looked to make it happen. Yet viewers surmised that Dennis didn't react like a man on the verge of closing a $70,000 profit on his $30,000 investment. What exactly could Dennis really be up to? The Mustang that got away. A few days after they bought the car, Dennis reached out to Richard, claiming he had indeed found a buyer for the car for $200,000. Richard had always seen Dennis as more than a friend. They were practically brothers, who went through the highs and lows of success together, including being side by side for Richard's Cannonball Run record in 2007. Richard didn't demand full transparency. He expected it of his friend. But Dennis had other plans. He didn't exactly find a buyer for the car. He, in fact, was the buyer. When Richard walked into his office with a six-pack beer to celebrate their new deal, Dennis hit him square in the face with the truth. "You have your $70,000 profit, and I keep the car." Of course, it was definitely the profit margins that they had agreed on. But just like Richard, a lot of viewers were just as disappointed. Dennis played his cards so close to the vest that no one could really tell what he planned to do. As expected, the fan base was divided. Richard was getting the exact profit he was promised anyway, and some fans just couldn't see why he could be disappointed. Other fans believed the profit margins did not excuse his cloak-and-dagger approach. Richard thought about the consequences of accepting this deal, and, like a true businessman, he believed he might have been blindsided, forcing him to question if he was making the right profit. What if he took the $70,000 profit, and then Dennis sells the car for a lot more? But here is the kicker. They had been friends for well over 2 decades. Was he really willing to lose a relationship he had invested that much time in over some extra profit? It just didn't seem like a plan for him. So he took the deal. $70,000 profit on a $30,000 investment? "I don't care where you went to school. That is good math," he said. Although he took the deal, got his money, and walked off into oblivion, viewers sensed something off. Some suggested that Dennis played the long con. First, it was he who brought them to Colfa. Then, he subliminally introduced him to the idea of a $200,000 buy, and had $50,000 cash ready in the office when Richard walked in. It was a tactic as old as time, where entrepreneurs carry cash to tempt a sale. To them, Dennis had just gotten away with unaliving someone. Although the deal had been closed, the speculations continued and divided the fan base even further. However, the speculations did not end at fans looking at the circumstances around the deal. There was something else. Something more frustrating lurked behind the scenes, and no one saw it coming.
Took over the collection plus the land and turned it into one of the biggest and most historic deals Gas Monkey Garage ever touched.
breaking at the seams. After the Mustang deal, fans continued to speculate about their friendship. While some claimed that they had finally broken up their 2-decade-long friendship, others believed they remained tight as thieves. Remember Jean Rogneby, the seller of the Mustang? Fans had mostly claimed that the old woman got the short end of the stick, selling the car for $60,000. Already, their YouTube pages were rife with fans asking the woman to be given at least an extra $40,000. A few months into the Mustang deal, Motorhead media was rife with questions about Jean. Did she know the true value of what she owned? Is there a way she could fight to get more than she was given in the initial deal? What started as just questions among fans developed into rumors, and rumors became theories. It didn't take long before theories of a lawsuit hitting Richard swirled around the media. While the sources remained anonymous and largely unconfirmed, it did not stop the speculation from spreading like wildfire. Although no one could really tell if Jean was actually looking for extra money or felt cheated by the pair, if a lawsuit was her answer, Richard Rawlings wasn't falling into unfamiliar territory. In 2018, Richard fell out with a few of his business partners. The Gas Monkey became a huge brand as soon as the Discovery Channel started filming Fast and Loud in the garage. So he created the Gas Monkey Bar and Grill, riding on that wave. At first, it seemed like a smart business play from a man who knew how to maximize opportunity. However, Daniel Flaherty, a managing member of the Gas Monkey Bar and Grill, filed a lawsuit against Richard, citing defamation and a deliberate and deceitful attempt to get out of his contract. At the time, rumors swirled about Richard going to jail, but they were wide of the mark. It was a simple civil suit. According to his lawyer at the time, Gas Monkey Bar has been in breach of Richard's license agreement since day one. They had reportedly tried to resolve these issues for the past 5 years, but the bar and grill's management team chose to box him in. But Richard wasn't the type to roll over and die, even when he was threatened with a $6 million lawsuit. He didn't build his brand by being careful anyway. So he fought tooth and nail until they reached a compromise. But if Jean did actually choose to file a lawsuit, can Richard actually beat this too? Even if he did win in court, what happens to his reputation? A legacy he had built for years. Although Jean's willingness to file a lawsuit remains unconfirmed, social media was rife with speculation. But in that uncertainty, one thing was sure: rumors don't last forever, and speculation always runs out of steam when viewers find some other trending topic. Still, the real question is, could the Mustang controversy really damage something far more than a friendship, his own legacy? A legacy more than a Mustang? Although Richard Rawlings had always lived his life around cars, and even got his first one at the age of 14, his personal life had way more buzz around it before he even made his way into reality television. At 24, he found love, got married to Karen K. Grames, but they divorced the following year. And just like that, it was another long wait until 2009 before he gave marriage another shot. This time he married Suzanne Marie Mergel in Las Vegas until their separation in 2015. Yet, they tried it again until they couldn't anymore in 2019. His life hovered around a legacy of printing presses, marital pain, and classic cars. Richard became a pariah of what a self-made man looks like. Imagine going from getting shot off duty as a cop and living in his Jeep after falling on hard times, to making $70,000 on a classic car sale. That never-give-up attitude to hit a mark regardless of the work that he needed to put in created a reputation around his person, and his legacy was built around it. He often granted interviews discussing how he took a massive risk with the sale of his printing press, with no assurances that he would ever bag that television. That was his real legacy. Grit, hard work, risks, and never taking his eye off the ball. Even when the network stopped producing Fast and Loud with no real reason on June 8, 2020, the Gas Monkey brand never died off. Maybe the cars were indeed an important part of the show. Richard owned it. Fans tuned in to see him have a go at anyone for delaying a client's car, poking fun at Christie, or just giving Aaron hell because he could. As far as careers go, Richard has left a mark on automotive reality television that cannot be compromised. Some fans argue it might be worth even more than a Mustang, but having a lawsuit on his record during his television era, paired with new speculation surrounding John Ronnaby's possibility of filing one, only proves one thing. Legacies can be tested by more than one action. A controversy here, a lawsuit there, and a polarized fan base who would be willing to see a speculation to the end pose a valid threat to any celebrity's image. Whether his legacy survives this Mustang test or not, only time will tell. What are the chances that John Rognaby finally files a lawsuit? Is there a chance that Dennis really did play the long game to have the car to himself? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.